Hey bead friends, it's Lauren Harpster. I am the designer, author, and instructor here at Bead and Blossom, where we are learning the art of French beaded flowers. Now, right now I'm working through my intermediate technique series where we are learning how to alter and build on top of the techniques that we learned in the beginner course series. If you missed my beginner course, I will have a link to that playlist in the description below. I'll also have a link to where you can download a free PDF packet for all of the intermediate technique lessons. In this lesson, we're going to be learning about the continuous basic frame, which is an alteration of the original basic frame technique that allows you to make multiple basic frame petals all on one single length of wire. Now, this technique is my baby. This is one that I invented during my time as a designer, so you're not going to see it taught in any of the older books. Now, the benefits of a continuous basic frame versus a regular one is that you have fewer stem wires at the end. And that means when you're assembling your flowers, you're going to have less stem wires to contend with, creates less bulk on your stem, so you get a nice thin stem on your flower. But it also makes assembly easier and faster because you can add an entire unit at a time instead of adding petals individually. All right, let's go get into it. The sample pattern that we'll be working with is 5 6-row continuous basic frames with a 10 bead basic row, round bottom, and pointed top. All right, now this is a continuous technique, and as with all continuous techniques, we need to leave a tail wire. And unless the pattern specifically says otherwise, leave about 3 inches. All right, so we need 10 beads for our basic row. So we're going to count out those 10 beads, and then we're going to be making a loop above the basic row instead of below it. So I'm just going to fold a little bit of wire right above. Now, this is actually going to be our top wire, so it doesn't need to be very long. We've only got 6 rows, so it can be about 1 inch long. So I've just got 2 inches of wire that I folded in half, and I'm going to pinch and hold that basic row and then my working wire together, and I'm going to twist this into a little loop right above my basic row. All right, I'm going to straighten out my frame. Now what you're going to notice here is that this looks exactly like an upside down basic frame, which is exactly what this is. So let me go over the anatomy of a continuous basic frame real quick. Now this is going to be our top wire. It's not the bottom wire on continuous basic frame. This is the top wire. Our bottom wire is the single wire down here. Our basic row is still in the same place right there in the center of our petal. And then the working wire should be attached to your frame just above the basic row. All right, so we need 6 rows with a round bottom and pointed top. So that is going to be the same, but you just have to remember that the single wire is the bottom wire now instead of the top wire like with regular basic frame. So we've got a 90-degree angle wrap at that bottom wire, and then a 45-degree angle wrap at the top wire. And this is row 4 right here. Row 5, and row 6. Now, just like with all continuous techniques, once we finish that last row of beads, we're going to double wrap right at the bottom of the petal to secure it. Now, what you're going to notice here is that with continuous basic frame, your petals are always going to have an even number of rows. Okay, now, again, we're going to continue on. We need 5 petals total, all on the same wire. We're going to count out 10 more beads for our next basic row. And we need to leave a little bit of a space here below our basic row so we have room to wrap all of our rows. Now you can measure if you want. I usually just eyeball it. You can make it about the same distance between the bottom of the basic row on the first petal and the bottom of the petal. And then you want to leave a tiny little smidge extra. So I'm just going to kind of lift up my beads right beside the first one and leave that amount of space. Okay, so I'm going to pinch and hold that wire below because I don't want it to shrink. And I'm going to pinch and hold that basic row because I don't want it to shrink or move around or anything. So I'm going to pinch and hold that pretty tightly and then measure out some wire for the next top wire. Fold that in half, pinch and hold, and then twist those wires together to make the top loop. All right, and now we can wrap our rows again. We've got a round bottom and pointed top. Now I'm going to kind of bend my second petal at a 90-degree from the first one because that helps to get my bottom wire straight. Makes it a little bit easier to wrap if that petal's out of the way. And we need a round bottom. Pointed top. Alright, so I've finished my petal, and I double wrapped below just like I normally would, and then I can kind of move these petals into line with each other. Alright, so I've got 2 petals completed, and I need 3 more. Count out 5 beads for the basic row. Measure the space that I need between. Pinch and hold that space really tightly. Pinch and hold my basic row really tightly. Measure the wire I need for my top wire. Fold it, twist it. And then I can wrap my rows. Now if you ever do notice that maybe your bottom wire shrunk a little bit, you can just untwist part of this top wire to give you a little bit more space. So kind of check that before you wrap, make sure you got enough space there and that nothing shrunk. Round bottom. Pointed top. Alright, so I've completed my 5th petal, and now it's time to finish off all of these little top wires. Now, I usually go through and give them another little tight twist to make sure that those 2 wires are twisted together really, really well. And then just like the top wire on a basic frame, we just cut them short. And then fold them to the back of the petal. Alright, and then I'm going to form this little unit into a circle by taking the working wire and just wrapping around that first petal. And then I can twist the 2 bottom wires together. Alright, and there is my completed little flower petal unit. Now we've just taken what could have been, if we had made this in regular basic frame, we would have had 5 to 10 little stem wires sticking out of the bottom of these petals. But we've just taken that and turned it into just 2, which is going to greatly reduce the amount of bulk on our flower stem, but it's also going to make assembly a lot easier because we can just add the entire unit, all 5 petals at a time, instead of adding 1 at a time. Now there's really only so much weight that 2 stem wires can hold, so a continuous basic frame used the standard way can really only hold so much weight, and it's best for smaller to medium-sized petals. But I want to remind you guys of a concept that I taught in my beginner course, which is reinforcing and combining continuous techniques. Now for this one's fine with just 2 stem wires as is, but if I had slightly larger petals, I could take the tail wires and weave it back around through the unit to add more strength to the inner circle and to help support larger petals. But I want to show you specifically on this one how to combine 2 continuous basic frame units together. Alright, so this is kind of like reinforcing, but it's also combining. We're reinforcing and combining all at the same time. Alright, so I've got 2 components here, and I've left the tail wires fairly long on them, on both of them, and then the starting tail wire is short, but the ending tail wire is long. Now we're going to match up these 2 components like so, and then I will take the tail wire from this first purple unit and I'm going to weave it around all of the petals in the second unit. Now this one I'm actually going to reinforce twice because it is quite large, so I'm going to weave around all of the petals in the orange unit. Got my wires all tangled up here. All right, so I'm going to weave around all the petals in the orange unit. And then I'm also going to go through with this same tail wire and weave around the purple unit. So each tail wire is going to make a full circuit, and that will mean that I will have reinforced twice. All right, so I took that tail wire that I was working with and brought it back to where it started. So I weaved all the way through the orange units and then back to the purple units again. And now I'm going to take this longer tail wire on my orange unit and I'm going to weave through all the purple ones. Make sure that you're getting these wires all the way down below the petal. Sometimes it kind of hooks around those beads in the bottom row, like that. So make sure you're getting all the way down below the petal. And I did it again. Alright, so I've made it all the way through the purple petals, and now I'm going to weave this same wire through the orange ones again to take it back to where this wire started. And when you're reinforcing, I'm kind of wrapping around the back of the petal this time. You could come over the front too if you want to go that way. It doesn't really matter. It's the same amount of support. Alright, so now I've just taken that tail wire back to where it started. So I've reinforced it twice and combined the two units together at the same time, and this creates kind of like a little wire mesh right in the center. This adds a little extra support to each petal, but also to the unit as a whole. But also by separating into two components and then adding them together, I've actually added 2 additional stem wires. So I can twist these 2 together on this side, and then these 2 together on this side of the unit. Now, if you need to, you could combine these into the center, but with a flower like this, you might want to use the stem wires on both sides, so you'll have a flower stem in the center, and then you'll have support on both sides when you're assembling. So that's just added extra support to each petal, to the unit as a whole, and added in 2 extra stem wires for stability. Now, this has just taken, well, it would have been, I've got 10 petals here, so this would have been either 10 or 20 stem wires, and I turned it into 4 instead of that 10 to 20. So this is greatly going to reduce the amount of bulk on your stem, but also when I'm assembling a flower, I can just slide this, I've got a stem wire here, I can just slide this entire unit onto the stem at the same time instead of adding in 1 petal at a time. So that is the benefit of using a continuous version of the basic frame technique. Alrighty, bead friends, that's it for my lesson on continuous basic frame. In our next lesson, we're going to be covering the split basic frame. Until next time, happy beading!